Is America in Bible prophecy? Bible scholars debate on whether America is in Bible prophecy. There are two places in the Bible that could refer to the U.S. The first place is found in Revelation 18, 1-24, where the Apostle John declares this: "After these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illuminated with his glory. And he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues. For her sins have reached to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her. In the measure that she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, in the same measure give her torment and sorrow. For she says in her heart, I sit as queen, and am no widow, and will not see sorrow. Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judges her. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived luxuriously with her will weep and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise any more. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and bodies and souls of men. The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, who became rich by her, will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as many as trade on the sea, stood at a distance, and cried out when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What is like this great city? They threw dust on their heads and cried out, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city, in which all who had ships on the sea became rich by her wealth. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for God has avenged you on her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence the great city Babylon shall be thrown down, and shall not be found any more. The sound of harpists, musicians, flutists, and trumpeters shall not be heard in you any more. No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you any more, and the sound of a millstone shall not be heard in you any more. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more, and the voice of bridegroom and bride shall not be heard in you any more. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorcery all the nations were deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints, and of all who were slain on the earth. America does seem to fit the description of the great city of Babylon. Is America Babylon, in which God will destroy in 1 hour? The second place is found in Ezekiel 38, 10-13, where the prophet Ezekiel proclaims, Thus says the Lord God, On that day it shall come to pass that thoughts will arise in your mind, speaking of Russia, Iran, Turkey, and a coalition of nations, and you will make an evil plan. You will say, I will go up against the land of unwalled villages. I will go to a peaceful people, who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates, speaking of Israel, to take plunder and to take booty, to stretch out your hand against the waste places that are again inhabited, and against the people gathered from the nations, who have acquired livestock and goods, who dwell in the midst of the land, Sheba, Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, And all our young lions will say to you, have you come to take plunder? Have you gathered your army to take booty? To carry away silver and gold? To take away livestock and goods? To take great plunder? Jesus said, as a sign of his coming and the end of the age, there would be an increase in deception, false Christs who will deceive many, wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, Christian persecution, apostasy, false prophets, and lawlessness, causing the love of many to grow cold. Jesus said all of these signs would come like birth pains. Jesus was likening last days events to a woman in labor. As the labor progresses, the pains increase in both frequency and intensity until the baby finally comes. As we get closer to Jesus' return, all the signs he gave us as a sign of his coming and the end of the age will become more frequent and more intense. All of these signs are manifesting around the world in our time. Luke 21:25. And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. This is exactly what is happening in our world today.
Celebrating the holy month of Ramadan in the ruins. Tariq Abu Ziyad and his family fasted from dusk until dawn. Now they're breaking that fast in what was once their home. A splash of colour in a sea of crushed concrete. Abu Ziyad says he fled his home in Ariha at the end of the year when the Syrian army and the Russians bombed this area.
Now my family and I are here on top of the destruction. We are reliving a very difficult and painful memory. I pray that God doesn't let anyone else experience this.
His mother says with the kitchen destroyed, they brought ready meals from outside.
The most important thing is that we relive our memories and eat in our home.
Ariha is situated in Idlib province, a few kilometres west of the strategic M5 highway. Held for years by rebel forces, it was the major target for the Syrian government to capture during an offensive in December. Nearly 1 million people were displaced by the violence. Most fled north, arriving at the Turkish border where many live in makeshift camps. A recent UN report says in 2019, Syria had the largest number of new displacements of any country, almost 1.9 million. The situation for displaced people living at the border was dire. When a ceasefire was agreed between Russia and Turkey in March, tens of thousands of people returned to their homes. Some, like Abu Ziyad's family, found them completely destroyed. But many found it easier to live amongst the ruins rather than return to the camp.
2 Americans captured along with 11 others after a failed armed incursion into Venezuela. They tried to get in by sea, but the plan floundered off the coast. 8 were killed, according to the Venezuelan government. This man said he'd organised it. Jordan Goudreau, a US ex-Special Forces soldier turned security contractor. He was aiming to topple Nicolas Maduro together with a few dozen ex-members of Venezuela's armed forces.
At 1700 hours, a daring amphibious raid was launched from the border of Colombia deep into the heart of Caracas. Our men are continuing to fight right now.
Maduro himself claimed that his longtime enemies were behind it.
Yesterday, Sunday, May 3rd, Venezuela faced down an attempted maritime incursion from terrorist mercenaries that were trained in Colombian territory under financing and support from the United States and the current Colombian government.
On Tuesday, President Trump dismissed that.
Nothing to do with our government.
The Venezuelan government also claimed that opposition leader Juan Guaido, recognized by more than 50 countries as Venezuela's legitimate leader, was in on the plot. He also roundly denied that, saying this was a ploy to distract from the country's many problems.
While Maduro is in power, there will be chaos, and they want to hide it. They want to hide the lack of gasoline in the main cities. They want to hide the struggle of hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans. Here they are, the fishermen, protesting again, asking for the rights to make a living, to buy gasoline, to feed their families. Maduro is chaos.
The opposition say they fear this will be used to persecute them. and the Maduro administration is deploying 25,000 security personnel to search for anyone else involved, they said. He's under pressure himself, not just internally, but increasingly from US officials who've slapped a $15 million bounty on his head on narco-terrorism charges. However real the threat of the incursion was, it does give his government something else to talk about.
Digging graves in St. Petersburg, Russia's second city for victims of COVID-19, a scene that's becoming more common. On Tuesday, the country reported the highest number of new coronavirus cases in Europe. And now there are disturbing questions over health workers who've raised the alarm about their working conditions.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Косякин Александр Александрович.
This video on Twitter shows Dr. Alexander Shulepov on the left and a colleague who's explaining how Shulepov had been forced to keep working despite having COVID-19. The colleague had previously criticised their hospital management for protective gear shortages and was questioned by police for allegedly spreading fake news. But another video made 3 days later, apparently at their hospital, seems to show Shulepov, by now being treated for the virus, retracting their complaints.
I feel all right. My temperature is not rising. My disease is asymptomatic. I have a runny nose. Otherwise, all is well. What we said was said when we were high on emotions.
On Saturday, according to local state television, quoting health officials, Shulepov fell from a second-floor window at the hospital. He's now reportedly in a critical condition in intensive care after suffering skull fractures. The same sources say he's the third Russian doctor to fall out of a window in the space of 10 days. The 2 others died. All 3 incidents, which are being investigated by law enforcement authorities, have prompted intense discussion in Russia about whistleblowers in the health system.
Everywhere we have a lot of problems. There are not enough hospitals. There are not enough doctors. We don't have enough medicine. We don't have enough equipment.
Across Russia, the number of recorded COVID-19 cases stands at more than 155,000, and officially the disease has killed almost 1,500 people. Moscow remains the country's worst-hit region, accounting for more than half of new cases, and here 90% of patients are younger than 65. Several cities remain on lockdown, and while much of Europe looks to ease restrictions, the Russian government says they'll stay in place until there's a vaccine.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues to spread across Latin America, the country with the highest death toll is Brazil. There, the number of dead stands at more than 7,000. In Sao Paulo, authorities have begun blocking main avenues in an effort to reduce contagion. Only an estimated half of the city's residents are obeying social isolation guidelines. Some say they have little choice. Brazil isn't the only country bracing for the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Peru's capital, Lima, healthcare workers have held street demonstrations over a lack of resources and protective equipment.
¿Qué es esto? Por favor, Dios mío.
Medical personnel also protested over the mismanagement of 20 bodies of coronavirus patients left unattended over the weekend in the hospital courtyard.
Video has come out of the hospital with bodies. 2 days ago it began to rain on all the bodies in the open air.
Fears over COVID-19 contagion have sparked unrest across many Latin American countries. In Honduras, hundreds took to the streets of the capital, Tegucigalpa, on Sunday to prevent the bodies of coronavirus victims from being transported for burial. Protesters blocked roads, fearing becoming infected by the bodies of the deceased.
We don't want them to send people to be buried in this cemetery because those people are infected and there are a lot of families here.
One of the strictest approaches to containment has been from El Salvador. Though some policies, like the forced long-term detention of people accused of violating stay-at-home orders, have raised an alarm over human rights abuse. According to the Pan American Health Organization, Latin America is experiencing what Europe did 6 weeks ago, meaning the region is only now entering the peak of the coronavirus pandemic.
China is pushing back after mounting criticism that it engaged in a cover-up about the origin and spread of the coronavirus. Chinese state media released this cartoon lampooning U.S. accusations as inconsistent and ridiculous. A Communist Party newspaper calling Secretary of State Mike Pompeo a liar over this accusation.
There is a significant amount of evidence that this came from that laboratory in Wuhan.
U.S. intelligence officials say they believe the virus is not man-made or altered, but have not ruled out it could have leaked accidentally from a Chinese facility. Just last week, China's executive vice foreign minister speaking to NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer.
We need to respect science and keep away from conspiracy theories.
This is an unusual move from normally reticent China, as President Trump intensified his criticism today.
What happened should never, ever have happened. China should have informed us that they had a problem.
But President Trump's opponents charge he's trying to divert blame as the U.S. death toll grows. Early on, he praised China.
China seems to be making tremendous progress.
According to U.S. intelligence, China threatened doctors who sent early warnings about the virus and was not candid about human-to-human transmission. And a new report from the Department of Homeland Security assesses China intentionally concealed the severity of COVID-19 from the international community in early January, while it stockpiled medical supplies.
The UK and Germany are also calling for more transparency from China, as many now want to know exactly how this virus started and spread so quickly.
Outside the courthouse, a small group of supporters gathered with flags and guns to watch the hearing on their phones and to cheer on Shelley Luther.
A determination has been made that you are in contempt of this court.
As you can see, we are still open.
The salon owner openly defied the governor's order that salons remain closed, ripped up a cease and desist letter from the county, and ignored a temporary restraining order from the court.
If you would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that your actions were selfish, putting your own interests ahead of those of the community in which you live.
Judge Eric Moyer offered Luther a chance to avoid jail time. He asked if she would apologize, acknowledge she was wrong, and agree to shut down her business until Friday. But Luther would not yield.
I have to disagree with you, sir, when you say that I'm selfish, because feeding my kids is not selfish. I have hairstylists that are going hungry because they'd rather feed their kids. So, sir, if you think the law is more important than kids getting fed, then please go ahead with your decision, but I am not going to shut the salon.
The judge sentenced her to serve 7 days in jail.
Take this defendant into custody, if you please.
1 day behind bars for each day her business opened its doors, while so many others stayed shut.
3 people have been charged in the fatal shooting of a store security guard. Police say the victim was killed for enforcing a state-mandated face mask policy. Laura Podesta reports.
A Family Dollar store in Flint, Michigan became a murder scene on Friday. Police believe a security guard, 43-year-old Calvin Munnerlin, was fatally shot in the head after he told shopper Charmel Teague that her daughter had to wear a mask before entering the store.
The daughter did not have a mask. Charmel did have a mask, but the altercation ensued, and we believe she communicated with Larry Teague and Ramon Bishop, and they returned to the store, and the shooting occurred.
Genesee County Prosecutor David Layton says his office has authorized felony warrants against the 2 men involved. Charmel Teague is reportedly under arrest. The community is now remembering the life of Munnerlin.
When I found out what had happened to him, it really broke my heart because I know what kind of person he was.
A candlelit vigil was held Sunday, and this memorial was created yesterday outside the Family Dollar store.
Ramadan is underway for people of the Muslim faith. The city of New York is providing meals for Muslims as they observe the season. I spoke with radio host and commentator Todd Starnes about how the city is treating Muslims, Christians, and Jews during the coronavirus lockdown. Todd, tell us what the city of New York is doing for Muslims for Ramadan.
Well, they're rolling out the red carpet, Mark. This is really a fascinating story. New York City just announced that they are going to be providing up to 500,000 free meals during Ramadan. And by free, I mean taxpayer-funded meals. This is part of an effort around the city to make sure that people have enough food to eat, especially in light of the fact that most New Yorkers have been quarantined. Their money has run out, and many of them, it's hard for them to find some place to get a good meal.
You say mosques were left out of the mayor's mandate to shut down places of worship if they disobeyed the lockdown and social distancing rules, right? What's that about?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, New York City laid down the law when it came to church houses and synagogues. There had been some churches and some of the more Orthodox Jewish communities that were still actually meeting in their houses of worship. And so Mayor Bill de Blasio really laid down the law, said that any church, any synagogue that violated the rules to stay at home would in fact face some sort of a penalty under the city ordinances and codes, and that they would actually send building inspectors to permanently close those facilities. Now, what was really fascinating, and we mentioned this at the time, the word mosque did not appear in the mayor's order. So we don't know if this was because of some sort of maybe they just inadvertently left the word out, or in fact they were solely targeting Christian churches and Jewish synagogues. Very suspicious, though.
What message does this carry to the people of New York if Muslims are getting special treatment?
Well, this sends a very peculiar message, because keep in mind, leading up to Easter Sunday, the city was really hammering this issue home to Christians that you should stay inside your homes. You should not gather for Easter Sunday services. And then the city turns around, and not only do they appear to be accommodating to the Muslims, but they're using taxpayer money to make sure everyone gets fed. I think it's very striking when you compare how the city handled Easter Sunday to how they are handling Ramadan. And it sends a message that for whatever reason, they are more accommodating to Muslims in New York City than they are to Christians and Jews. And that is a problem.
One day, Jesus is coming. You may be at church. You may be at work. You may be asleep. God grant that you will be ready when he makes his personal appearance. My God, what if his appearance occurs on a Sunday morning?